Welcome back to the Gentleman Ultras YouTube channel. I am Richard Hall, your host, and I'm joined today by Wayne Girard. How you doing, Wayne? You okay?
Yeah, doing great. Ready to talk a little bit about Papu Gomez out to Sevilla. So heart's broken.
Yeah, sad news. Well, you're exactly right. We're here to talk about Papu Gomez, who's which we'll talk about a lot more about how he's sort of graced improved all of our lives by watching him. But a question for you, and I know you're not prepped for this one, so apologies, but can you remember, and I'm not talking about a player retiring like a certain Francesco Totti or Javier Zanetti, but a player from outside of Italy, a non-Italian, leaving the league and causing this much sort of an outpour of emotion? Because from top level commentators to everyday fans to even words from other players, this is a player who, for me, and until I'm going to make a guess and say 4 or 5 seasons ago, isn't a household name. And yet, in the latter stages of his life, he seems to have managed to do what a lot of players can't do in a full career. And can you remember anyone who's, and I'm sure there is, I'm sure people can write in and tell us, but I can't remember one.
Not for all of Italy, because I think if you look back at Kaká, it forebodes kind of like the fall of Serie A, very much like our fall for the next 7-10 years until like the past 2 or 3 years. But that was Milan based. I think the rest of Italy was like, we don't care that you're losing Kaká, like good riddance, because Milan was on top of the world for quite a while. But what Papu has is everybody likes him because Atalanta is like a success story of Italy, right? They're the underdogs. There's no reason to hate them. How could you hate a provincial side? So he really tugs on those emotional heartstrings, I think, for pretty much every fan of Italian football who can appreciate an excellent player. And it's this saga of him, coming over to Sicily at a young age, leaves, eventually comes back, works his way up from a Atalanta who's at the bottom of the table, makes them the best playing side maybe in Europe on their day. So that's, it's very sad, I think for us.
It's strange, isn't it? Because, like you say there, the way that Atalanta's rise, we've all seen over the years, it sort of coincided with his as well. So I think this is why that divorce is so prevalent in people's minds, because people like Atalanta, like you just said, and they like Papu Gomez, and the two have always seemed to be one. It's like that couple of all your friend groups you don't expect to split up. And then that happens, and it happens quickly. And it felt like it could be stopped. And it's really strange because with this, for me, I mean, we'll move on to talk about Papu's full career now as well, because you've written a piece which we'll talk a bit more about, which is coming out in the Gentleman Ultra soon, which I can't wait for. But just talking about Atalanta in this, I'm going to put a question to you about Atalanta that, as we said then, they've risen really fantastically well under circumstances that were quite impossible. Everyone knows Atalanta is a team with a great youth academy. We've seen the likes, whether it's from Lentini to Montalivo to Pazzini, a whole, always had a great academy, and they've used it well, like some of the big clubs. Funnily enough, over the last couple of years, that youth academy sort of had a bad harvest, if you would. It's run dry. So they've had to sort of look to people from all over the place to sort of pull in these waifs and strays and sort of gel this team together. And Papu and like Josip Ilicic, of course, have been some of the success stories of that. Now, before we go on to talk about, I'm not going to debate how great Papu Gomez is, just like Josip Ilicic. But obviously, Ilicic has had his issues at the moment. Now we're seeing the departure of Gomez. Do you think that with Atalanta having a great under-19, great under-23 squad coming through, that maybe this is not the end of the world for Atalanta, that they may have to, because of the ages of Ilicic and Gomez, have to start thinking about life after them both? And so this may be something that just forces them to act a little bit quicker? Or do you think, on the other hand, losing these two is the beginning of what we've seen as this Atalanta revolution? Is this the beginning of the end now?
I think they have the luxury of not having expectations, because no one remembers, if you remember the season where Atalanta actually finishes 7th after finishing 3rd or 4th. I think it actually was 4th. So without those expectations, they always have this availability to work their way up kind of like undercover. And they can use these players. They can get players who can fill a role for a season or two and no one thinks twice. But the seasons that they do produce Kessié and Conti, everyone's like, oh, look what they're doing. Look at this this amount of power that they in their scouting network, and John Bo, who's the fitness coach, and all these kind of things that come together. So I don't see them falling off, because I think that with Percassi, they're financially solvent. They're a team that, they can build up. They can get the occasional player who's going to lift them up, and they're pragmatic. They're not, a team that makes rash decisions. Like when they get Zapata in, I think that beyond statistics, and because at the time Zapata was not the type of striker he is today, they look at a player who offers not only potential, but everything that goes along with it, the body size, the characteristics that fit the mold of the existing players. So they kind of know what they're doing, I think, long term. And I think they're always going to be in the top Europa League places. I can't see them dropping out of 7th place, really. So I think
it's a really good point.
After Papu, they'll be okay. They'll have Ilicic. They'll get players like they were even looking at El Shaarawy, I believe. So they have the framework there to keep them competitive. Are they going to have these magical runs in the Champions League? I don't think so every year. But every few years, I do see it. I do see that for the long term for them.
I think you're right in the sense of, I think that the whole reason that especially I think Gasperini deserves credit in some respects for pulling this team together. And as you say, the whole management structure as well, scouting network. And, they're going to have potentially a good crop coming through. And that's why in one respect, like I said, we're going to go back to the beginning in a moment, but this divorce, as you called it at the start, between Gasperini really and Gomez, does it work for both, or do you think it's something that potentially could have been avoided?
Gomez can go on and win a Europa League, not much more. I think he just made it. I think he should have. One thing about life is forgiveness. If it's your friends, family, coaching staff, whatever, life goes on and you forgive. And that's how, kind of like the corny, I'm watching a lot of Cobra Kai, love overpowers hate with Danny LaRusso's dojo. But not to get off track, he loses on this one, I feel, in a way, because yes, you go to Sevilla and life is calm. There's no expectations, really. But you're also 32 years old. You're playing, for the past 2 years, you've been playing the best football you ever have. You led a team to the quarterfinals. You broke all the records for that team. Meanwhile, Gasperini stays, and you are the captain who's left. And you've left not only a team, but a club that loves you and a fan base that really loves you. And I get it. I understand. He has 3 young kids, a wife, and the possibility to live comfortably forever. But why not do that with the people who already love you? Why jump ship? Because they speak perfect Italian. His wife's Italian. He speaks fluent. Like you wouldn't even know if you didn't know he's from Argentina. When he speaks Italian, is perfect. He has a little bit of a twang, which is funny. But Bergamo, I see him mountain biking and going skiing and all these fun things. I'm like, why would you leave such a comfortable life with the people who love you? And that, to me, just knowing him after doing so much research on who he was, something deep must have happened. And that kind of that kind of puts me off, because I can't imagine how severe it was to make him want to jump ship.
Yeah, I think that's the point, isn't it? That it's so severe because it's such a quick, clean break. Sometimes these things go on and rumble on for a long time, and then maybe don't happen, and anything. It takes a while. But this has been something, as you say, it's such a deep rooted. Well, let's be honest. It looked like all we know is that it came out of the game against FC Midtjylland in the Champions League, where Gasperini apparently had told Gomez to change positions and to follow some instructions. He hadn't done it. It seemed to break out after that, and it's rumbled into something that just seemed to snowball out of control. And like you say, he did seem to be the person who was in a perfect situation. Now, obviously, like you were saying, you've done the research for this article, but one thing I would like to ask you then, because for me, I look at a lot of people's reactions, as I'm repeating myself a little bit here, about Papu Gomez, and everyone's saying, the league is losing such a talent, and it is. But it wasn't always like that. I mean, I don't, for me, this is a player who, unusually now, you don't often see players who, especially in the type of player he is, they're normally always like that. You mentioned before about his size, his stature. I mean, we don't often see those type of players coming through because the academies now, especially if I look over in the UK or even coming through some of the Italian academies, they're athletes first and foremost and footballers second. And to have this guy who is so talented, and obviously was showing it until, and I'm sure he will show it in Spain, but he didn't, you would expect a player like that to have always been this tricky little trequartista or whatever, you might be. But for him, he seems to just have developed late. He's a strange player for me because you go back and yes, he reminds me a little bit in the sense of how Josip Ilicic has developed. They used to call him the highlight reel at Palermo. Now he's so consistent. And Gomez developed this consistency seemingly in Bergamo. Or am I getting that wrong? Because let's go back. Let's go back when he first turned up in Italy from Catania. What do you think?
I think the two of them are street ballers whose managers have tried to convert them into modern tactics. And because there's no attacking mid, or there wasn't in the 4-3-3s after Barcelona dominates the world, right? And everyone starts playing 4-3-3. They're trying to put them to play a way that they didn't grow up. If you look at Gomez and Ilicic, definitely spent tons of time as kids dribbling, trying to fake out their friends and their boys on the pitch. That's who they are. Those guys, they need to be in the central. They need to be finding space because that's their bread and butter. It's all about that. And when you tell a player like that, go out on the wing, and this is honestly, I swear, is what happened exactly to me in high school because I was one of the faster players and I was skinny and I could run all day. Go out on the wing. You can't do that to a player who wants the ball. You're going to demoralize them. You're going to take away their best qualities, which is actually finding space to get the ball. And when you do that, yeah, that same player has those abilities. Papu had that talent. He was fast. He could finish on the last post. He could make that run and then beat the goalie. But really, it's not where he should have been. And that is Simeone's fault. Because when Simeone sees him in Argentina, at the very beginning of his career, Papu is somebody who plays el ganche, I think it is in Spanish, like the hook, a little bit behind the number 9, and he's always getting the ball. Simeone sees him and he's like, he's like, man, when you're going out to Europe and when you get there, you're too small to play in the middle. They're not going to play you there. So if you want to keep going on in your career, I'm going to move you onto the left. And that to me destroys like half of what Papu could have been early on. And then like even now, Papu still credits a lot of his success to Gasperini, not Simeone. He doesn't say, oh, this guy made me. I do think he instilled those qualities, those hard, rugged individual qualities that makes him a top player. But it's Gasperini who takes him back to his roots, full circle, and really allows him to express his individualism. And that's absolutely the player he is.
Yeah, I think that it's a good point because I think, especially when you talk about that the timing, I think it's important because at the time, he's at Catania, like you say, it's that 3-year period, 2010, 2013. And the whole world is sort of, I can't remember what year it was, Barcelona dominated the Champions League final. I think it was against Manchester United around that time. And people are looking at, wow, that's the way to play. And football goes in cycles. And I do think as well, for a long period of time now, people still talk about trequartistas in Italy. But there's also the argument, is that player or that number 10 in any other culture, is it dead? Is it over? Is it still possible to have that? You look at the likes of, I don't know, Mesut Ozil at the moment, and people look at it and say, well, in a high pressing game, you can't play in that system. You have to adapt. Look at Christian Eriksen. We were just talking about him before we came on. Conte's trying to change him into a regista rather than this number 10 that doesn't seem to work. And I do think that potentially at the time he maybe did suffer from that. And it's an interesting point about Simeone and his teams. The way Simeone develops to stop that Barcelona in some respects of how to nullify that sort of threat. And again, it's interesting because I think that some players at that time, there's probably a lot of players overlooked just on the nature of the fact of, you mentioned it before, but he's a player who wants the ball. wants the ball. And you're playing under Simeone, a lot of these teams, they don't. There are teams that don't want the ball. If you go through history, they can win. I mean, using obviously with an interconnection, Jose Mourinho wins the Champions League not wanting the ball against Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Red Star Belgrade against Marseille didn't want the ball. It's people misconstrue sometimes the great Milan sides of not wanting the ball, and it's quite the opposite. There are teams who don't fit, and it's strange that with Catania and the way he was deployed, that it's not shame. It's not. It's more of a shame, should I say, of the way that happened. So from that point on, I mean, Catania at that time, by the way, really good side. I mean, everyone used to enjoy watching that side. I think Francesco Lodi was in that side, wasn't he? It was that time. That time, yeah, great player. And but then he has to move on, and obviously he moves to Metallist, doesn't he? And what do you think that attracted him back? Because at that point, I know there was money at the time in the Ukrainian league. We saw a lot of players moving out to Russia, moving out to the Ukraine. Do you think it's just a move based on money? Because it only lasts one season, doesn't it? And then next thing he's back in 2014 at Atalanta. And then that's where it really, really kicks into the gear of the Papu that we all know and are going to miss now.
I don't want to spoil the story, but Metallist is the only team who puts up the money that Catania is asking. So instead of forcing his hand to get to Inter or Atletico Madrid, he does the right thing and he hangs out until there's a suitable bid for the club, and then he negotiates with Metallist and goes out to the Ukraine. There's a couple of Argentinians out there, but I think if you read a couple things which have been put in English, they'll say that Papu went for the big money over the smart move, and that's absolutely not the case. He actually did Catania a solid. He was a stand-up guy there, and when he goes out to Metallist, yeah, he's getting paid, but one, he has a hard time settling in. He has a young wife, they have a young son, and they're really off the grid. This is not a top 5 league. He's disappointed with the football. He actually joins there to get into the Champions League. They get banned from the Champions League because of match fixing in about 6 years prior. And now he's stuck. And then the Ukrainian war hits out, and his entire area is being, there's insurrection. And they can't go out, they can't eat, they can't get fresh water or clean or any of these basic things. And now what? So Atalanta is, after he goes back to Argentina, he's like, I'm not going back. He's like, I don't care about the money. You're not getting me back on a plane. And something catastrophic happens actually on a plane with Malaysia Airlines. And the commercial jetliner gets shot, 300 civilians killed. So crazy stuff is happening in the Ukraine. It's a civil war. So when Atalanta gives out that hand, he takes it. And for some reason or another, and I think because it's misconceptions, no other Italian team gets in for him. There wasn't this big line of suitors trying to get Papu back to Italy because he has this moniker as a money chaser. So
yeah,
they meet on the level playing field here, him and Atalanta, to start their journey.
That's the thing. And you've answered the question before I asked it in some respects of, why wasn't there any other teams going in for him? And I've always linked this. I mean, obviously, yes, okay, about the money that he would have been on, but obviously he would have had to take a cut to go to Bergamo. But also that why there wasn't more teams after him. And for me, in my head, it's always because, and I try and put myself back at that time. And again, this is what I keep coming up with, is the fact that he wasn't a household name. This is a player who at the time, I think this goes under the radar because it's not the biggest signing in the world, is it? I mean, Giacomo Bonaventura goes to Milan. I think that sort of prompts it, as far as I remember. And they think, okay, they're going to bring someone in. Again, you're looking at a guy, if I'm not mistaken, Bonaventura moves into the centre in Milan, but also really more been a winger at Atalanta. And so they're looking for that sort of replacement. And again, you're looking at, he's a winger in a sense. And looking back, and you think of Catania, yeah, I always knew him as a winger. And it's almost like there's a player that sort of is at Catania that leaves Italy, and then this other player comes back, and it's different. And it just is a completely different type of player. And you mentioned it before about Gasperini, but, this sort of, whilst people say about Bergamo that, yes, they take on some of these players who are either out of favour or someone won't take a chance on them. I think there is a loyalty that starts from the very start, doesn't it, with Bergamaschi, because they are very workmanlike. We all know that Brescia and Atalanta, it's the deep voices, the real the way of we work and this is us, and they always talk about they built half of Milan and they're very proud. Obviously, a beautiful part of the world, but there's a culture there. There's a fan culture. There's not an expectation, as we said before, about what you're going to win, but there's an expectation that you do everything you can to perform and to win, and to at least give everything and leave it on the pitch. And do you think that culture, along with his skill, that, like you said before, hadn't been developed, sort of starts to cultivate what we now know?
Yeah, you could definitely give Bergamaschi pride a little bit to that. They have a Swiss-ish culture. You know, I'm heading with that kind of that unity, that we are a little bit different. We are contained, and because of that unity with outsiders looking in, there's definitely that type of feeling there. And at first, he does go back to a winger, but even Gasperini at first notices, he's like, you're going to drift in just a little bit more from the left. And as time evolves, there's also this conception that it's as he gets older that he goes to the central. It's not the case at all. It's actually because Cristante goes to Roma and Gasperini looks around and he's like, who can possess these qualities to move the ball up the pitch? And he actually got someone who's much, much better at that position.
What you said about Cristante's qualities, I was like,
yeah,
should I? No, I won't bother.
Yeah, because Cristante has something like 12 goals, but 10 of them actually come from Gomez in that season where Cristante pops off and he starts like unleashing. It's because Papu is creating from the wing, and Cristante is a big player. And as he's pushed forward, he's kind of like positioned at the top of the 18 all the time. And he's able to, with that creativity behind him, put them away. So that's the secret there.
Yeah, it's true that he does really come on, and but I mean, okay, here's a question for you then. So we've seen a lot of the history of how he's developed to where he is, and obviously that role's about to transition. He is that person who's becoming an influence in the dressing room, becomes captain in 2016, he says, referring to notes. That's the one when Christian Raimondi goes, yeah. So he's obviously becoming and enjoying that responsibility and becoming, obviously, like you said before, part of that culture, part of that amazing support, that will have helped him as well. But the development's quite unnatural at this age. I mean, how do you explain a guy who's, what is he, 5'6"?
Yeah, he's 5'6".
5'6". He's 5'6". We know he's got ability. We know that, but you wouldn't say it's. I wouldn't say it's a God-given ability like when we talk about the absolute elite level players. But there's, like I said before, Ilicic seems to get confidence to not just try those amazing runs and those amazing shots from distance every once or twice. Once or twice a game, and they all go out the bloody stadium, and then 1 in 10 comes off. You're seeing this consistency start, and Gomez starts to play with this eloquence and this sort of, I don't know, it's like the music's building and he's just starting there, and it's an incredible transition, and it's so strange for me in later life to be able to suddenly start getting that confidence. Now, I can understand that if we're talking about a player who, is let's just use any defender over the age of 30. We look at the likes of Kylian and Bonucci and people like that. But you can see that, and, we talk about Buffon in goal. They adapt their games. Buffon gets injured, he adapts and changes the way he plays because he's not as athletic and he can do these certain things. And the intelligence grows. And it's the same with the defenders. But do you think that Gomez actually is underrated as such an intelligent player potentially, because people see the goals, people see the ability, and probably presume he's always been like that. And I can't stress enough that for me, it's that sort of transition, the way he sees the game and the way he understands obviously Gasperini's system. That confidence just seems to have him dictate games now. He stopped being just this player with ability. He's transitioned into a player who can change a game. But now, for me, by the end of it, he's absolutely dictating games.
I think the easy answer is that there's the strength and conditioning coach which comes over. and you see Papu kind of like put on some pounds, especially in his legs. And he looks very muscular. If you look back at like 2019, 2020 photos, he's kind of ripped for a 5'6" guy. So he puts on weight and strength in that regard, but I also think he's happy. It's the intangible quality, and his happiness breeds creativity, and that with a consistent position, consistency with his teammates, all that chemistry building, it just allows him to get the very most out of his abilities. And that's a really nice thing to see. It's attractive when somebody can put everything they have into their ability to reach your maximum output. And I think that's what you saw last season. And there's no coincidence why when he goes out against Paris Saint-Germain in something like the 56th minute, that Atalanta starts to drop and they start to take so much pressure. Because you got a diminutive player like him, he's finding the space, he's pushing the ball forward. And when you take that away, you like, it's, and then you get into the conversation of, well, what if they have Ilicic and Ilicic pulls the strings? I can't agree with the argument that being without Papu, that it's the same Atalanta. Simply cannot agree with that.
I'm with you on that. Two things. Firstly, when you talk about the sort of diminutive player who has to be happy and who has really improved on his physique, it reminds me a lot of Lorenzo Insigne. Now, for me, Lorenzo Insigne is a much more gifted player, naturally, has this vision and insight that is fantastic. And I still think that he now is developing, but I don't believe that up until this season, he has not, as you say, been every single thing on strength, conditioning, mental state, the intelligence on the pitch. He's not been maximizing it. And Maurizio Sarri always said, of Insigne, if he's happy, he'll play well. And at the moment, because of the relationship he now has with the ultras, because of everything else that's going on, we're seeing probably, I think he's one of the most exciting players to watch in Serie A at the moment. And Gomez, for me, has got less ability, but as you rightly say, has maximised that. On the point of Atalanta, I think Atalanta now, this is the big transition. I think that it will be the fact of one of the most, let me say this, one of the most attractive things for me about Atalanta in the last 5 years is that whilst you've had Gomez who can dictate the game and Ilicic can provide something special quite often, when they've been injuries or obviously Ilicic had his problems and maybe Gomez has been out, the best thing about Atalanta is you could take any one player out of that team, whether it's the goalkeeper, whether it's the batter, whoever, and you can then replace them. And they know their job. They're just this oiled machine. They just know. And it's not any real one player as a focal point. For me, you take Gomez out, you lose that bit of genius that can absolutely win you a game. And especially in the Champions League, I think that's so important to have that player who can just unlock something out of nowhere. But as a whole, as a team, I don't think they will look for another Gomez, or if Ilicic, if Ilicic went, I don't think they'd try and look for another Ilicic. I think that they have the Gasperini system, and they will work around that system. And, obviously, if they do come across another player who gives them even half of what Gomez or Ilicic gives them, then they're very lucky. But I don't think they're going to be looking. You can't look for another Gomez. No way.
There's a handful, and I think you hit Insigne there, which is absolutely right in my opinion. Is if you put that player into that position, he would flourish. Him out on the wing, he can do it, but it's the same type of situation. Yeah, you can do it, but that player wants the ball, and if he's happy, he's going to make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with Gomez, it's as we'll go back full circle now to the beginning. Have you been surprised by the sort of not outpouring of emotion? No one's wailing and crying at apart from maybe people in Bergamo, but it's just it's a general disappointment that we're not going to see that talent in the league.
So last night he put on Instagram this like emotional video with like a drone and a whole production team of him like, I'm so sorry, like I have to go. Like, you don't have to go, man. Like, you're on contract for 3 years. You don't have to do this. I don't know what you're thinking. Why are you running away? But it's just baffling. Yeah, and he's got this social media aspect behind him. His wife too, she gets in on it, and she's kind of quiet. You could tell he's definitely the alpha. And for both of them to go like hand in hand, they're funny. They record their lives, kind of their kids, and like I mentioned before, their mountain biking experience. I showed my fiance like the other day, and I was like, "Look, babe, I gotta get you a mountain bike. Like we gotta do this like them." So, everyone kind of.
I'm surprised you didn't say you. Yeah, you can get me a mountain bike when you get a 3-year contract with Atalanta.
Yeah, like a little specialized mountain bike that he's ripping through the Alps with. Yeah. So
it's crazy. I mean, do you think he's running away?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't think Gasparini is the type to really kick him out. And that's why I paused there a little bit before I answered, because I really wanted to think about that. I think that he could have stayed if he wanted to. And that something was definitely said, which really pissed him off to a point where he was like, I'm not happy here. And I don't like what was being directed to me because it might have a long-term implication that maybe on his position or something that was derogatory or was personal. It could have been something personal.
Yeah.
And I mentioned it. So it's unfair for me to say that, he could have run away, but from the outside looking in without actually knowing what happened, I have to say, yeah, because he's the captain and the captain sticks it through thick and thin. Like, that's why you're the captain. That's what you do.
I think like we said, we'll never know. It's just speculation, obviously, of course. But I've been thinking about this obviously before we recorded this, and a couple of things where it does feel like a little bit maybe that he's running away, and I'd love to know. I'm sure we'll never know unless he writes a book at some point or Gasparini's vision will come out. But question for you. So let's just say this choose is a little different. So Gomez takes whatever. Yeah, maybe Gasparini as well. Who knows who's done what. But just let's say Gomez says, okay, you know what? That was bad, but I'm going to stay. Now, you said there he's the captain. So he's got influence. So 2 questions here. Coaches don't normally last 5-6 years these days. So these years. So could he have, if he'd have decided to wait it out and see what happens to Gasparini, would he have played in the rest of the season? Would Gasparini have played him? And secondly, would this be happening? And these are my final questions for you now. If they were playing week in, week out in front of their home supporters, would Gasparini and Gomez have parted ways? Because with the Atalanta faithful being able to have their say.
I'll answer the last question first. He definitely would have stayed. That's amazing. Yes, that's a great point. Is that if they could have interjected some of the ultras, they would have convinced him to stay for sure. Think about that. Would he have reappeared? I think so, because he comes on as a sub against Juventus, even after he sings their anthem, which I didn't like that at all. I love Gomez. I didn't agree with that at all.
It's a catchy tune, though. I hate
that.
I mean, I don't hate you. So anyone who's watching this, and that's not what I said. I said I hate the Ineos. Some of them, they're terrible. But the fact of the Juventus one, think what you like about the club. It's damn catchy. I mean, maybe he just was,
I don't even know it. I can't say yes to no.
Oh, we're gonna after this. We're gonna have
cover my ears. It's like when you play a Led Zeppelin album backwards on a vinyl and you hear the words of the devil. That's what. No, I'm kidding.
I'm gonna see social media, but no, we'll have a whole thing on club songs. I mean, that one is Juve's is good. It's not as good as the best one. Is Navarra's. Navarra's is like rap. It's amazing. It's just like, what the hell? Udinese is another classic. We'll do a top 10.
I guess I could see it. If it's like a really catchy tune and he's just breaking balls, I could see how he's getting under his coach's skin, but you don't do it, once again, as the captain. You don't do it in plain sight where there's televisions. But yeah, he would have refeatured. He definitely would have been out there. Sometimes you got to suck it up, and that's work. And if something becomes personal, you just got to get on with it. And at the end of the day, these footballers, they're working. They're under contract. You get out there, you do your job. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to do that because it's emotional. But emotions is what sometimes can kill you. So. Yeah,
very true. Very true. So I think we're going to conclude this episode on Papu Gomez. It's a shame. It's a massive shame that he's And I nearly said he's going to be no longer with us, but that sounds like he's passed away. So no, I'm sure he'll turn up. I mean, Sevilla always tends to be in Europe, and who wouldn't expect that next season, surely, Atalanta make the Europa League, Sevilla make the Europa League. It feels like it's written in the stars, that, doesn't it, somehow? But excellent stuff. So just before we let you go, Wayne, just give everyone just maybe a snippet, I mean, about your article. I know we discussed Papu today. Just give them a little idea, a little hint, because it's going to be out very soon on our website, and also where everyone can sort of find you on social media and, hit you.
This story has to do with volcanic eruptions, civil war, resuscitation after someone's completely down and out, and then peace. And those are the themes of this, as well as horror. And we're going to get to the real emotional center of what happens in Bergamo during COVID. And that's it's sad to read because it's so recent, but with these articles that I've used to gain information and I've studied from, they're active and they really do hit home because they're so recent. And I didn't want any of that to get lost. So I tried to gather as much as I could before it gets lost on the internet forever. And the little things that were said, the little things that were happening, the ambulances and the church bells being the only sounds that you can hear through the entire city, the singing on the balconies, which happens in all of Italy except Bergamo. So this is if I could use one word for this piece, it's intense. And I really hope that it resonates with the reader.
No, that's fantastic. And we'll certainly be pushing that out as much as possible when it comes out. Do you know, if you hadn't mentioned Bergamo, that little introduction you did to your article, I just thought it was about the US elections. But you mentioned Bergamo, so people know now. But no, it's been great to do this again, Wayne, and we will be touching base next week. I'm convinced now we're going to do something on club intro songs, but no, we'll certainly let everyone know what we're going to do. But Wayne, thank you very much, and grazie Papu Gomez, I guess.
Yeah, grazie Papu.
Ciao for now.
Guys.